6 million years ago, humans were nomadic, tall, and exceptionally athletic. We moved through an open world as hunter-gatherers, enjoying a degree of individual freedom that is almost impossible to imagine today. But by 4000 BCE, in the marshes of Mesopotamia, we traded that freedom for a new invention, the city of Uruk. This was the dawn of agriculture, the moment we stopped following herds and started building walls. Survival now depended on the grueling process of harvesting cereal grains. Using heavy stone mills, the citizens of Uruk spent their days crushing wheat and barley into flour, collecting and storing it for the winter. This shift from a nomadic diet to a sedentary one left a mark on our DNA. In just a few generations, the average height of men dropped from 5'9" to 5'3". We were trading our peak physical health to become landlocked farmers. This chart captures the trade-off. Individually, we were shrinking and becoming less healthy. But collectively, agriculture allowed our population to reach massive new scales. Uruk eventually swelled to over 50,000 residents. To keep 50,000 people from starving or falling into chaos, society required a new type of organization. We had to pack humans together and organize them into a strict, unnatural hierarchy to manage the food supply. Agriculture turned out to be a trap. It gave us a stable food supply, but it also built the first social pyramid, demanding that we exchange our nomadic independence for a system of collective survival. For the few people at the top of this new pyramid, there was a constant threat of rebellion. How do you maintain a system where a massive peasant class does all the labor to support a small group of elites? The first tool was codified law. In 1772 BCE, a Babylonian king named Hammurabi created a legal framework that would set the standard for centuries of rule. The Code of Hammurabi functioned as a manual for social stratification. It established a system where human value depended on class. The laws are explicit. Break a noble's bone, yours is broken. Break a slave's bone, simply pay a fine. These early laws were engineered to carve inequality into stone. They ensured that the massive base of the pyramid could never legally claim the same rights as the people at the top. Law was the structure, but the elite also needed a way to make obedience feel like a moral duty. They needed the gods on their side. In Egypt, the entire state functioned as a machine to serve the pharaoh. Viewed as the sole link between gods and humanity, thousands of peasants spent their lives building massive monuments to ensure his spirit would rule forever. Across the world in China, the Zhou dynasty introduced the Mandate of Heaven. This established the idea that an emperor's right to rule was granted by the universe itself, making any rebellion a crime against nature. Philosophical systems like Confucianism reinforce this order. Farmers were taught that fulfilling their specific role in the hierarchy was the highest virtue, and that social harmony required total respect for authority. Religion and philosophy became the ultimate crowd control technologies. They made a peasant's struggle for equality feel like a struggle against the divine order of the world. There was one final tool: fear. Niccolo Machiavelli famously argued that for a ruler, it is safer to be feared than to be loved. Why would any farmer surrender their crops to a brutal feudal lord who offered them nothing in return? Because the alternative was worse. The world was filled with nomadic forces like the Huns and the Vikings, who would raid and burn unprotected settlements to the ground. The Mongol horde utilized this fear strategically. By propagating an image of unstoppable brutality, Genghis Khan ensured that cities would often surrender the fruits of their labor rather than face his warriors. Ultimately, the social pyramid operated as a protection racket. The elite extracted labor from the masses, and in exchange, they provided the only defense against total destruction from the outside. For thousands of years, this pyramid structure was the global standard, but eventually, a series of economic and social shocks began to pull the blocks apart. The first shock was the bubonic plague. It devastated the population, and while the human cost was horrific, it created a massive shortage of workers across Europe and Asia. As the labor supply plummeted, the surviving peasants gained unprecedented leverage. They could demand higher wages and more rights, forcing the landed nobility to compete for their work for the first time in history. In 1215, King John was forced to sign the Magna Carta, establishing that even the highest authority was subject to written law. By including habeas corpus, the document ensured citizens could no longer be imprisoned without a lawful reason. Finally, the religious monopoly broke. Martin Luther's protest against indulgences in Wittenberg triggered a reform movement that challenged the absolute power of the medieval church. By the late 18th century, the forces of economics, law, and religion had spent centuries chipping away at the foundations of the ancient hierarchy. In 1776, in a brick building in Philadelphia, these forces converged. The ancient logic of the pyramid was finally explicitly rejected. A group of patriots looked back at nearly 4 millennia of stratified history and chose to discard the premise that a noble's life was worth more than a commoner's. They replaced that ancient system with a single sentence: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." By placing their signatures on this document, they made a collective choice to end the divine right of kings. The early history of civilization was the process of building a massive social pyramid to survive a dangerous world. Our modern history is the difficult, ongoing attempt to rebalance that trade, trying to keep the security we earned in the city while finding a way to regain the freedom we once had on the open savanna.